During a recent interview, the founder of Blackwater, Eric Prince, stated that Africa should be recolonized by the West.
Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes. Enough. Then it's time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough.
He then proceeded to label African leaders as corrupt and incompetent, all the while wearing the white supremacy hat. He certainly spoke in a condescending tone regarding addressing a whole continent, a continent that laid the foundations of the Western civilization he is so proud of. What most white people fail to realize is that African leaders who tried to liberate their people from the chains of neocolonialism were either overthrown or murdered.
Pretty much all of Africa are incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens, because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris. If you go to these countries and you see how they suffer under absolutely corrupt, made-up governments that are just criminal syndicates.
He then concluded with the all-too-familiar white savior complex disease, a state of mind of whites who, for some reason, believed by colonizing Africa, they effectively saved us from poverty and eternal damnation.
If you go to these countries and you see how they suffer under absolutely corrupt, made-up governments that are just criminal syndicates.
A question typically posed by so-called whites when crimes during colonialism are brought up is an all-too-familiar rebuttal. What about the infrastructure developed by colonizers? This touches upon a key aspect of pride for colonial nations and their populations. They point to the roads, railways, and buildings they established, saying, "Look at what we provided for you." However, it's important to recognize that Africa was home to highly organized cities long before the European slave trade began. The remnants of our historical architectural achievements stand as a rebuttal to the condescending remarks of those who yearn for the days of colonization. The infrastructure that colonizers left behind in Africa, which they often brag about, was built primarily for their own benefit, using the forced labor of local populations. This means that these projects, far from being generous gifts, were constructed on the back of our ancestors' efforts, aimed at exploiting Africa's resources for the colonizers' gain, rather than to assist African people. Furthermore, it's important to acknowledge that Black individuals, including African Americans, have made significant contributions to modern technology. Contributions often thought to be exclusively European. For instance, Lewis Latimer played a key role in developing the telephone and inventing a durable light bulb. Innovators like Frederick Patterson and George Washington Carver made advancements in automobiles, while Granville Woods and William Burr contributed to train technology. Frederick Jones was a pioneer in refrigeration and air conditioning. Alexander Miles improved the elevator. Mark Dean was instrumental in computer technology. Charles Drew created the blood bank. Gerald Lawson developed the modern video game console. George Mensah made critical advancements in fiber optics for high-speed internet, and Raoul Niccolo made significant innovations in television. These contributions, along with the numerous Black individuals who have been pivotal to NASA's success, highlight the substantial role that Africans and African Americans have played in technological progress. These advancements could have occurred in Africa with or without the impact of colonization, challenging the notion that they are exclusively white inventions. This leads to speculation about what Africa's technological landscape might have looked like today had it not been for the disruptive forces of slavery and colonization. Some in Africa view colonization positively, seeing the European occupation as having played a liberating role, despite rejecting the current economic dominance. The belief is that, given Africa's perceived underdevelopment prior to European arrival, any crimes committed during colonization were a necessary evil to lift Africans from their supposed inferiority. The notion that Europeans brought Africans down from their primitive ways and embarked on a civilizing mission is widely accepted. This narrative even extends to debates among some Africans over whether British or French colonial rule was more beneficial. Significantly, the most advanced civilization in Europe during this period was the Moorish civilization in Spain and Portugal, created by the Berber blacks of the Maghreb, known as Moors or Saracens, and the Arabs. This civilization played a pivotal role in lifting Europe from its post-Roman Empire, decline, and poverty, essentially kickstarting the European Renaissance. The wealth and cultural richness of Africa during the imperial era are epitomized by figures like Mansa Kanku Musa, the 14th century emperor of Mali, who is still celebrated as the richest man in history. Africa, alongside the Arabs, not only surpassed Europe in wealth before the slave trade, but also contributed significantly to European civilization during the Middle Ages through the influence of the Moorish civilization, especially evident in Spain's architectural heritage. The devastation wrought by the European slave trade marked a tragic end to Africa's rich history, comparable in its brutality to modern-day terrorism. Led by Portuguese slavers under the Vatican's direction, this era saw the systematic destruction of African civilizations and the massacre of entire populations to meet Renaissance Europe's demand for sugar and coffee, all justified in the name of Christianity. Prominent African empires, such as the affluent Congo, the advanced Swahili civilization in Tanzania, Kenya, and the vast Monomotapa Empire in southern Africa were among those decimated. Despite valiant resistance from Africans, the continent experienced a steep decline due to the European invasion and the firepower they brought with them. This dark period, coupled with Arab slave trading, led to the loss of 400 to 600 million African lives, accounting for 66 to 75% of the continent's population, constituting the most egregious crime in human history. Given this backdrop, it raises a poignant question about the so-called benefits of European colonization of Africa. How can the same forces responsible for such destruction claim to have contributed positively to the continent they decimated? In the late 19th century, European countries, wealthy from the profits of slavery, met at the 1884 Berlin Conference to divide Africa among themselves. This division was fueled by a mix of greed and a desire to impose their racial and cultural beliefs. After the slave trade ended, Europe found Africa in a weakened state, making it easy to take over. African societies, already damaged by the slave trade, faced further destruction under European colonial rule. Despite heroic resistance from Africans, many communities were wiped out, preferring death over losing their freedom. This resistance was often in vain, leading to the loss of entire villages and the near disappearance of ancient cultures, such as the Ashanti Empire. It's important to remember that Africa has played a vital role in shaping the world, including influencing Europe itself. The idea that Europe was the civilizer of other lands is a misinterpretation of history. The actions of the Portuguese Empire and other European colonizers in Africa ended a rich history, resulted in the deaths of 73 million people for the benefit of Europe, and extended the horrors of slavery through theft, segregation, and cultural destruction. Moreover, many technological advances credited to Europe might have originated in Africa, if not for colonization. Colonization was, in every sense, a catastrophe for Africa, involving widespread death, enslavement, suffering, and cultural loss. It is considered a crime against humanity, comparable to the European and Arab slave trades, with no redeeming features. Therefore, any attempt to speak positively of colonization overlooks these grave injustices and disrespects the memory of those who suffered.